What's going on, guys? This is Richard from TraderLion, and in today's video, we'll be talking about a really important subject when it comes to trading, and that is how to find leadership groups. And this will not only help you basically coming out of correction as we start a new bull market in finding those tremendous opportunities and basically allow yourself to narrow your focus on the best of the best stocks in the best of the best groups. But on the flip side, when the overall market is a little bit stretched, we've been in an uptrend for quite a while, being able to identify these leadership groups and noticing when they're breaking down and breaking moving averages will give you an excellent warning that the overall market might be ready to enter a corrective state. So finding these leadership groups is tremendously important and useful. And in this video, we're going to cover a bunch of key things here. First, of course, what is a leadership group? Then we'll talk about a few different quotes from William O'Neill as well as Stan Weinstein about the power of finding these leadership groups. Then we'll actually cover how to find them, both a top-down and bottom-up approach. We'll talk about the characteristics of leadership groups, how to use ETFs to find them as well, and also answer the very important question, when does a group stop leading and how to identify that? So diving into it, what is a leadership group? Basically, a leadership group is a group of stocks that share common characteristics, a similar kind of sector or area of interest, and together they are outperforming the rest of the market. And it's often really obvious when we've got a significant downtrend in the indexes and we see overall groups kind of starting to decouple from the indexes and kind of buck the overall downtrend of the rest of the market. Another key thing to look out for is overall groups that are decoupling from the market, especially when we're in a correction. And say we're below the 21 EMA on the S&P 500, we're in a downtrend, and basically the overall index is forming a lower low on a particular day. If an entire group is kind of outperforming and at that same time forming a higher low, so not undercutting that previous significant area, that's a sign of decoupling and overall relative strength versus the rest of the market. So overall, we're looking for groups that as a whole are outperforming and showing superior price and volume action, and often they share themes as well as fundamental drivers. And basically, you want to ask yourself the key question, where is money rotating into as that shows up on the charts in terms of price and volume action? Moving on, here are some quotes from both William O'Neill as well as Stan Weinstein. First of all, we've got a quote from O'Neill, which basically shows that about 50% of a stock's move is directly attributable to the strength of its respective group and sector. And we've got a very similar quote here from Stan Weinstein, where his study showed that equally bullish chart patterns, one in a bullish sector and group, one in a bearish sector and group, will have vastly different performances because of the strength and weakness of those two different groups. So that's why we want to focus on overall leading groups and leading stocks within those leading groups. Moving on, let's talk about how to actually find these leadership groups, given that they are so important. Well, there's kind of two main approaches, the top-down approach and bottom-up approach. And then there's kind of a third approach, which is just a hybrid or combination of these two approaches, which is pretty much what I use personally. So with the top-down approach, basically what you're going to do is take a look at those sectors and look for the strongest among them, whether it's technology, healthcare, energy, financials. And then once you've identified those strongest sectors, you take it one layer further and look for the strongest groups within those strongest sectors. And for this, ETFs, as we'll go through, are extremely useful. There's so many different ETFs kind of designed to follow a particular industry group or even sector as a whole. And those are a great way to both identify as well as play some of these leading industry groups. Now with the bottom-up approach, you're basically taking the opposite stance and you're starting with the stocks first and looking for the strongest, absolute strongest stocks in the market, stocks that are breaking out to new all-time highs, breaking out of early stage bases, gapping up on earnings. And then you're taking a look at similar stocks to those, so within the same group, and seeing how they're performing as well. And if enough are looking like they're under accumulation with great price and volume action, great earnings and sales as well, fund ownership, then if enough of those stocks within that group are acting well, that overall group can be considered a leadership group. Now, the third approach is basically a hybrid approach of both of these, and that's pretty much what I use. I look at both ETFs as well as just look for and scan for super strong stocks that are moving with high momentum, strong price and volume action. And then I kind of combine those two approaches to kind of point me in the right direction at those leadership groups. And there's many people who post some great scans, great lists on Twitter. And that also is a great way to keep in touch with what's actually working in the market right now. So that's basically high level, how to find these different leadership groups. And basically you want to continue doing your normal routines where you're scanning for ideas, scanning for stocks up on volume, doing your market analysis, sector analysis, and just keep an eye out for overall themes that may be developing in terms of overall groups that are acting and moving together. So that's kind of a high level approach of how to find these leadership groups. And now moving on to kind of specific characteristics to look for, let's start with relative strength. So as I mentioned before, the overall group and the stocks within the group should be exhibiting relative strength versus the market. So during a correction, they should be holding up well, forming bases, forming higher lows when the market is forming lower lows, making new highs as I've got listed here, and overall should be bucking the overall downtrend. Additionally, once the market kind of is forming a bottom and we're seeing maybe a falter day on the indexes, we want that group to be having a lot of breakouts from those bases. We want earnings gap ups, and we basically want overwhelming evidence that there is institutional accumulation going on in these stocks. Volume characteristics, in terms of upside volume, we should see high volume to the upside. And when we're seeing pullbacks, overall lower volume. It doesn't have to be lower every single day, but as a whole, on average, we want lower volume to the downside. And in terms of new highs, as I've already mentioned, we want to see a super strong action. And in every market cycle, basically the leadership groups are going to show up over and over again within that new highs list every single day, both new highs, new all-time highs, as well as new 52-week highs. So basically pay special attention to that list. And that's a great screen to run to find those leaders. We also want to see the ability of these stocks and the overall group to be able to trend above moving averages. That's key. We want to see group decoupling, as I've already mentioned a few times, and we want to be able to identify kind of the fundamental drivers and theme, although this is a little bit secondary to price because sometimes the driver isn't quite as clear until after the fact, after the trend has already been well underway. So that is the characteristics of these potential leadership groups. And now let's move on to some ETF analysis. So basically, you want to have a list of a bunch of different group and sector ETFs that you can go through and look for those technical characteristics that we just talked about. And you can perform technical analysis just like with any other stock or equity and compare it to the overall SPX, other groups. You can use the relative strength line and look for relative strength phases. And basically, as I mentioned, just go through these every single day, and that will definitely keep you on the right track. And nowadays, as I said, there's basically an ETF to track anything you would want. So it's a great way to kind of narrow your focus and quickly find those leadership groups. And overall, I've just got a comparison chart of both ARC as well as on top, we've got XLE. And you can clearly see over the course of 2022, right now, which is leading and which is actually not even just lagging, but really lagging versus the rest of the market. So that's a quick run through of how to use ETFs to analyze and find those leadership groups. Now, this is a very important question, and it's definitely important that I cover this in today's video. Leadership groups don't basically continue to lead forever. They've got kind of their own kind of life cycle. And basically, you want to look for those same kind of negative price and volume action signs as you would look for in a normal chart. So you want to look for breakdowns, decline in relative strength, where the relative strength line starts lagging as you see in this picture. You want to see or look for stocks and overall groups breaking uptrend lines, breaking moving averages, having failed breakouts from late stage bases. So essentially you're looking for those same warning signs as you would look for in a normal stock chart, but you can do this on the overall ETF of the entire group, or just look one by one through that group and look for those warning signs because often individual stocks, especially the leaders within a group, will break down before the rest of the group and market does. So with that said, here are some key takeaways from this video. First of all, you want to focus on those leading groups. That's where the biggest potential in the market is. You want to look for that relative strength, both on an individual stock basis as well as with the overall group. Then there's kind of multiple approaches, top down versus bottom up versus a hybrid approach. And then you want to look for that leadership rotation because as we've mentioned before, leadership groups are often different from market cycle to market cycle. That's pretty much it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please go ahead and leave a like down below and subscribe if you're new to the channel. And I'll see you guys in future videos. Thanks.